My name is Paul Martin. I was the Prime Minister of Canada. I was also the Minister of Finance. And when I was Minister of Finance, I, along with the other provincial Ministers of Finance in my country, in Canada, brought in the fundamental changes to the Canada Pension Plan that meant that it had become actuarially sound for 75 years, and that it was, instead of being an issue of considerable contention in Canada, it became a beacon of confidence for young Canadians and for senior Canadians. Retirement is an incredibly important part of a person's life. And as we age, pensions are playing an more important role every day. What happened really with the Canada Pension Plan is that when it was initially introduced, it was a tremendous breakthrough. It recognized that working Canadians were going to require some kind of a foundation to their pensions. Subsequently, however, over a 30-year period, inflation occurred, economies changed, and what was happening was the amounts of money that were being paid in premiums relative to the benefits were clearly insufficient to cover the payout. And as a result, the pension funds started getting into bigger and bigger deficit. In fact, when I became finance minister, Canada had one of the worst deficits of any of the industrial countries. We had a steadily deteriorating debt ratio. In fact, we had maybe the worst debt ratio of all of the industrial countries. So we were in real trouble, and we had to act. And we did, and we eliminated the deficit, and we got a declining ratio over a 4-year period. And we thought that, in fact, that we were really singing pretty, except that one day, the Deputy Minister of Finance came to see me and he said, guess what? The Canada Pension Plan has a higher unfunded liability than the national debt. And if we don't act with it, what's going to happen is that young people are increasingly going to lose confidence that there will be a pension there for them. And ultimately, what we're going to have to do is impose massive premium increases on the generations that are going to be following us. And they're going to take a look at us and they're going to say, you've been living off the fat of the land, and the fact is we're having to pay for it, and we're not going to have decent pensions. And that would have been really incredibly damaging to the national psychology. And so what we did was I called my colleagues, the provincial finance ministers, and you got to understand that in a federation, you've got all of these different governments out there. They all have to work together. There's always problems how they're going to work together. And I called my colleagues and I said, guess what? We are going to have to take a look at the Canada Pension Plan, of which we had co-responsibility. And my message to you is we're going to have to increase the premiums and decrease the benefits. And that is not a message any politician likes to hear. And yet they all rose to the occasion. They all recognized that something that should have been done 30 years ago had not been done. They had all come through these deficit problems that I've just talked about at the national level, and they said, we're not going to let that problem last. And so we met and we solved it. I think you've got to understand, first of all, that we did not want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Premiums that were being paid, which were around 3%, had a historic beginning some 25 to 30 years ago and were clearly insufficient. They had risen to about 6%. But if, in fact, the fund was going to be returned to its proper degree of liquidity and solvability, those premiums were going to have to rise to 14%. And that was going to be a crippling blow to all of the young people who had already lost confidence in the plan. And so what we decided we would do is that we would advance from the 6 to 9.9% in order for my generation who was benefiting from the plan, or who would benefit from the plan, to pay its fair share, and thereby avoiding the necessity of going to 14%. And we also wanted to make sure that, in fact, that the investments that the pension fund was going to make in the future were going to be results that could essentially carry the benefits of the plan as they were. And so we came to the conclusion that the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board could not live with a multitude of objectives. It had but one objective, which was to maximize investment returns without undue risk of loss. The Canada Pension Plan today, in about an 11-year period, has become one of the 10 largest pension funds in the world. We never thought that this would happen in that short a period of time. It has over $300 billion in assets. We never thought that this would happen in that short a period of time. And it has built up immense confidence among the Canadian people. And because of that confidence, it's been able to go abroad. And it's now highly diversified, and it's in a number of countries. And I'm very pleased to say that, in fact, it was one of the first investment funds to invest in China. And I think that gives an indication of the capacity that the independence of this board has had in managing that level of assets. So returns are great. It's far more highly diversified than any one of us would have expected. It's a major international fund, and it's independently managed. And if there's any indication of when a plan is successful, I think that's it.